Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, Bahashim, Rechak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who were well. Peace and mercy to the Tazadak Akim out there that's laboring this truth with all sincerity. All right, I'm the brother Thamayim. All right, here with a quick lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shah. Going into the book of Proverbs, the 13th chapter, verse 13. We're going to keep it real basic. So it reads, "Whoso despiseth the word shall be destroyed, but he that feareth the commandment shall be rewarded." Now, I went into the word despise, all right? It reads to look down upon, all right? And there's a lot of Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, who look down upon, the men of the Lord, all right, who look down upon the scriptures. You have, a lot of people, especially celebrities, saying they don't believe in the Bible. They say that the Bible is a contradiction, all right, how it doesn't make sense, all right. They and exactly what they do, they really despise the words of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. Okay, that's the reason why they, go into these other ideologies and philosophies. All right, that's the reason why a lot of, the Lord's people, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you really focusing, really a lot of, so-called Negroes and Latinos, they really, a lot of them really do dive into that Islam demon. Okay, because they really despise and look down upon the words of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah, truly because the Lord didn't open their eyes, to see, to give them that spiritual discernment, to give them that understanding. All right, the Lord blocked them, from this understanding, from this wisdom. Okay, so it says, look down upon, to scorn, disdain, treat with contempt. It reads to look down on, to scorn, and that's exactly what our people do. They scorn, all right? They mock, they scorn. They say that, the Israelites are conspiracy theorists. They say that the Bible is a contradiction, all right? They say the Bible is a man-made book. That's because these people really despise the words of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. They despise righteousness ultimately. Because even with these people diving into these ideologies, they still they still chase after their lust. Meaning, you still have people that, you have some certain serious Jake that take, that Islam thing serious, but you have majority of them that still smoke weed, rap, sell drugs, still in gangs. All right, go after their own lust. All right. But really, they despise righteousness. They just really despise the words of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shah. All right, just like the world do. They despise. They look down upon us. All right. As a matter of fact, real quick, I'm gonna get 2 Peter's chapter 3, verse 3. It reads, "Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lust." Right. So we living in the last days of the last days. Ever since Yahweh Shah came on the scene, that represented right there the mark of the last days. That's when the last days began. Now 2,000 years later, we living in the last days of the last days. We seeing prophecies unfold. All right, we see the vision speaking. So right now in these days, just like in the time of Yahweh Shah, you had people that were scoffing, mocking, the Lord. And right now you have, in modern times, you have people scoffing and mocking at, the prophets. All right. It says walking after their own lusts, doing whatever they feel like doing, whatever that's pleasing to their flesh, being carnally minded. All right. Being adulterers, being, super comfortable, being murderers, being scammers, drug dealers. Okay. Even those who live in who don't live an illegal lifestyle, but they put all they treasures in their corporate jobs, you know. There's always people on all levels scoffing at the men of the Lord. On all levels, you have people who work their 9 to 5s who scoff at the men of the Lord, and you have your people who do nothing but straight wickedness that scoff at the men of the Lord. But either way, they're still scoffers. You know, you may have family members who look at you crazy. All right, those are great examples. But really, they despise the word of Yahweh by Hashem Yahushua. You know, especially when you bring out, you know, that a man can have more than one woman. All right. It says, in saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. All right. And this is what they say. Hey, man, you know, the end times they've been saying the world was going to end since the year 2000. Since the time before that, 1990, when they blew up the World Trade Center. Since the time before that. You know? Verse 5, for this they willingly are ignorant of, meaning what? They lack knowledge. That's because they're not discerning the times of the end. They're not discerning the times. They're not comparing. You know, they're not watching the current news and linking up with the scriptures, because first and foremost, they don't really have understanding of the understandings of the scriptures, of the prophecies. They don't understand who's Babylon the Great. They don't understand that Babylon the Great is America. They don't understand the book of Revelation, the different books in the book of Revelation. All right, going into the third woe, you know, representing World War III. They don't understand Ezekiel 38. They don't understand the book of Jeremiah, chapter 50, 51. You know, they don't understand the books of Isaiah. All right, they don't have the understanding. They lack the knowledge. They're ignorant. They're willingly ignorant. They don't want to know. You know, remember the scriptures say that, you know, the people want you to prophesy smooth things. All right, that's what our people want to hear. They want to hear about how how we could build communities and get reparations, things of those natures. All right, it says that by the word of the Most High, the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water, and in the water, you know, going into the firmament, you know, going back, you know, even the time of Noah, you know, they was scoffing, man, before the flood came. Okay. It says, whereby the world that then was being overflowed with water perished, you know, going into the time of Noah. You know, you had people, when you read the book of Matthew, the 24th chapter, it was people still partying, drinking, giving in marriage. All right. And scoffing at Noah. All right. When Noah was trying to warn them, you know, that a flood was going to come, that was going to rain from the heavens. All right. And from then, the people perished because they wasn't building that ark. But right now, our people are not building a spiritual ark. Okay? So it says, verse 7, last verse, but the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So the Lord has reserved fire. You know, that those thermonuclear missiles, those ICBM missiles. All right, the chariots of fire, when Yahweh Shah returns with the angels. All right, he reserved ungodly men for that. All right, or unrighteous people, the non-believers. Remember, the scriptures speak about in 2 Ezra, the 15th chapter, that the unfaithful shall die in their unfaithfulness. Okay, so the Lord reserved them, all right, to fire. You know, and even when you read the book of Jeremiah, the 16th chapter, it goes into the different plagues the Lord is going to bring, all right, here, you know, that he's going to bring here towards Babylon, the different plagues, all right, and a lot of ungodly people are going to, you know, are going to perish in those times, are going to perish due to those plagues, all right, because they despise the words of Yahweh by Hashem Yahushua. So going back to Proverbs chapter 13, verse 13. All right. So it says, whoso despiseth the word shall be destroyed. We brought out precepts going into that. But he that feareth the commandment shall be rewarded. All right. So those who fear of the Lord, all right, who fear of the commandment, who keep the Lord's statutes, commandments, because if you fear the Lord, you will keep his commandments. All right. If you love the Lord, you will keep his commandments. Pursuant to John, the 14th chapter, the 15th verse. Yahweh Shah said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. All right. Proving that the law is not destroyed. The law is not put away with. You know, though we're not justified by the law, but you still got to keep the law, because that shows your works. That shows your faith. That shows your fear. You know? So it says, but he that feareth the commandment shall be rewarded. And the Lord is going to reward them that, keeps his commandments, man. Who's following his word. Who's enduring. Who's remaining patient for the kingdom of heaven. Because that's the reward. Being joint heirs with Yahweh Shah. Receiving salvation. That's the reward. Instead of participating in those thermonuclear destruction, that fire, those missiles, that concentrated fire from the chariots, the salvation is going to be the reward. All right. And being joint heirs with Yahweh Shah. So let me get the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 12. It reads, matter of fact, let me see another one. I think I want this Psalms 58 and 11. Yep. So this is Psalms chapter 58, verse 10. It reads, the righteous shall rejoice when he seeth the vengeance. He shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked. All right. So, the righteous, we're going to be rejoicing when we're seeing the downfall of our enemy. All right. Which is Esau, Edom, and these other nations. All right. When we see the vengeance when Yahweh Shah returns. It says, so that a man shall say, verily there is a reward for the righteous. Verily he is a power that judgeth in the earth. All right. In those times, we're going to be rejoicing, man, especially when we get beamed up in those chariots, when we see the destruction of America. All right. The Lord is going to reward us. All right. With an everlasting kingdom. All right. So, that's why it's important to keep do what you got to do for the Lord, man. Do what you got to do for Yahweh Hashem Shah, so we can receive that crown of life. Okay? But with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Lord, when this is edifying, I want to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh Hashem Shah. And with that, shalom.